Okay. I think that was it. All right, so indicator 6 is the least restrictive environment for preschool children with disabilities, so preschool LRE. We're going to talk about the importance of using the correct LRE codes. We're going to go through some codes and how to determine which code is appropriate for your students. So the LRE requirement is one of the central concepts, of appropriate placement under IDEA, and this also applies to preschool students. For those of you who don't know, OSEP requires that we report on 3 areas for preschool: preschool LRE, preschool outcomes, and then early intervention to preschool transition. And of course, in this webinar is going to focus on indicator 6. This is from, the next few slides are going to be some excerpts from the law. This just reminds us that the state's supposed to have policies and procedures in place so that every state meets LRE requirements, and that includes preschool students as well. On the compliance piece, the LRE provision essentially requires that students with disabilities receive their education in the regular classroom environment to the maximum extent appropriate in the environment with the least possible amount of segregation from the students who are non-disabled peers and community. Continuing more with the law, it also addresses the inclusion of preschoolers by extending the LRE environment to children with disabilities ages 3 through 5. In January 2017, OSEP issued a Dear Colleague letter, and this was follow-up on the 2012 guidance. This letter is to reaffirm the position because there were a lot of questions about preschool LRE at the time. To reaffirm the position of OSEP on the inclusion of inclusion of children with disabilities in early childhood programs. It says that a full continuum of services should be made available to these children, and that the LRE decisions for preschoolers should be based on the needs of the child and not the programs or the convenience of the LEA. Again, you guys know that the placement decisions are made by the team, not by one person. They should be based on the child's most appropriate LRE. And if the child's not going to participate with the typical peers, then that last page on the signature page needs to really explain why. Why can't these services be provided with typical peers? All right, the 50-50 classes. Do you guys have an inclusion preschool class in Jasper City?
Yes.
This is where the 50-50 mandate comes from, the 50% typical peers. This is the definition of a regular early childhood program. It's going to be a program that includes a majority, so at least 50% of non-disabled children. There were questions about informal settings like play groups or home settings. Would they be considered regular early childhood programs? And the answer to that is no, because they don't have any kind of requirement to comply with any kind of standards or learning programs. Resource services, those are going to be any services. This can be special education, speech, PT, OT, whatever, that are delivered in locations that remove the child from typical peers. Wherever that is, it can be in the building, it can be service provider location, but if the child is not receiving services with typical peers, then it is considered a resource service. Again, from some more things from the letter, before you place a child outside the regular education environment, the IEP team has to think about, are there any supplementary aids and services that can be provided that might, help this child access the general education curriculum without being removed from class. Again, we're always looking for FAPE for our preschoolers. And for preschool, that looks a little bit different. That's the reason that we have different LRE codes for preschool, is that there is no quote unquote typical preschool day. When you have the big girl LRE codes for K through 12, it's the percentage of the day that the child is removed. But for preschoolers, your day could be a 6-hour day or 8, or your day could be a 3-hour day. So that's the reason that we have different LRE codes in the first place for children with disabilities that are in preschool. Let's see. And this is more of the funding piece. That Dear Colleague letter addresses the costs that special ed teachers and administrators, related service providers and everything. So if preschool money does not cover the preschool services, which it usually does not, then excess costs can be paid with the IDEA funds. Let's see here. All right, so this is more about indicator 6. That was the legal piece out of the way. Do you have any questions about that? That's this is kind of why, that's why we do what we do. And plus there's a huge body of research that supports the efficacy of providing services with typical peers in language, special education, typical services, all of those areas for preschool students. So go back to indicator 6. We're looking at the percent of children age 3 through 5 who have IEPs. For measurement A, you want to look at the students who attend a regular early childhood program and they receive the majority, and 51% of special education and related services in the regular early childhood program. And that's your LRE codes 20 and 22, depending on how long the child's school day is. And any students who have an LRE code of 20 or 22 are counted towards that measurement A. For measurement B, you want looking at children who attend separate special ed classes, separate schools, or residential facilities. And of course, this one you want to be on the low end, and these are LRE codes 16, 17, and 18. And now your targets for each one of these change every year. There is a one-pager on our website that gives you the target for each year. Of course, your child count data for this year went in October 1st. I believe that next year in 18-19, it's 53% for measurement A, greater than or equal to 53%.
Can I interrupt you
Sure.
there, Stephanie? Okay, so if y'all think about that, the state is saying that they want 53% of preschoolers being served with an LRE code of 20 and 22. To give you a frame of reference, our performance profile data had our current LEA at 9%. So that means we're serving 9% of our preschools in a 20 and 22 LRE code, and they expect it to be 50%. So there's a significant gap in how we're serving preschoolers and where we are supposed to be according to our state goal. And that's why we're getting our training today.
Okay, well then I have a question, because the majority of I'm a speech therapist, so the majority of my students in the preschool setting are speech students.
Yeah.
And so I pull all of those students into small group. It's impossible to do speech therapy in that daycare classroom. So I've always marked those students
as a
and I'm probably going to say, I'm going to say the wrong number because I'm not looking at my screen.
Okay.
But
a code other than 20
other than a 20 or
22.
22, because I take them into that separate room. And am I coding that incorrectly?
No, if you take them into a separate room, then they're not a 20 or 22. However, now even with the speech there, and I'm an SLP as well, that's my background. For articulation students just starting off, of course, the paradigm is for pull-out. However, the research, when you get them to carryover stage, and certainly for your language students,
yes,
the research shows, and it's not our comfort zone, it's not our training, but to get in that classroom with typical peers is going to, the efficacy, you can't argue with the research on all of that.
Right, I agree.
And again, you're looking at for the majority of services and about half the children. It's not 100%, you're looking at, like I said, and look at each individual child. For example, how much you work on K and G with preschoolers. I had a center that when my students got further along, where they were able to work on, were comfortable in words, getting to phrases, I would go in and have a transportation center where we did cars and trucks, and we said come and go and that kind of thing. And it wasn't, when you first start off, it's challenging, because it's not something that is in your comfort zone, but it's something that you can, certainly try. And like I said, looking at each child individually.
Right. Okay. So initially, when I go in with a 3 or 4 year old and I'm working on articulation only, and I'm working on specific sounds, initially at isolation and syllables, direct words, would I go in and amend and change the LRE mid? I'm just confused, because that's how generally all of my students starting out at the preschool, I have very few students currently that I'm serving that are not Artic. Most of the language kids that in our district are DD students. And those students, we do go into those kids are a little bit different because we do go in and work with them in the classroom. However, my Artic kids, every one of those kids on my caseload, I do pull them out. I do go in the classroom and do some whole language things if they have language goals. The priority, I mean, most of the services I provide, I do in the small group outside the classroom, but only because they have 20 kids in that, and it's almost impossible to do anything with 3-year-olds, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And get anywhere. Now I do go in and do some, but the majority of their services. So I just always felt like that LRE was the majority of their services. Where do you provide their services?
It is.
It is.
She's wanting, or the state is wanting, the majority of our services to be.
And the most of our preschool students are speech kids.
Right. Well, and that's, you know, that's, but if you look at your students as they get, you know, maybe not as when they first start off, but as you progress with them, it may be, there may be a time when you say, hey, you know, I can get in that classroom and, you know, work on some of that carryover and make it very functional for our students, especially the littles, you know.
And so you
by the
would
time
then
they're
change.
4-year-old and 5-year-old, before they get to kindergarten, look at changing that already.
Yeah, if it's appropriate, you know, it's never going to be a requirement for 100% because some of our students just, I mean, you know, it's appropriate to pull out. That's why it's 53%, not 100%. And that's something, you know, that's not, we set our first target, but OSEP requires that we increase it like that.
Okay.
So, you know, and it is what it is. Like, it may be that when we look at your LRE code for your system, we look at everyone, every preschool student.
Well, and one thing too, this past couple of years, we've had several who are not in any community-based.
Right. I mean, you can't help that. It just is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like thinking out of the box a little bit for, like I said, for your language students, for your fluency, you know, if you have fluency students who are at that level, for your Artic students as they get, you know, further along and they're more comfortable with sound production,
Right.
Special education, looking at some of your OT and PT getting in the classroom, it's really everything.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, we've had some brought-in services. Those would be a 19.
Right. So if you have a brought-in student and you're serving them DD or SLI, is it appropriate to bring them into one of our preschool classrooms?
Well, yeah, that and some people do that. That's up to the IEP team and what's appropriate for that child. But when you as an IEP team place a preschooler, you are obligated to provide FAPE. So if for that preschooler, the IEP team feels like they need that time with typical children, or that you guys have in the classroom, whatever, that can certainly be part of your service provision.
That's something that as a district we can talk about, how to get sort of more creative about how to meet this state goal with the students that we have, you know, where we can try and just kind of think outside the box a little bit more. So sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Like if you have a child who's your stereotypical DD child, or a child who needs language services, and you have a really good, you know, circle time that's language rich, then it might be something to consider. If the child would be a 19 who does not have a program, that it might be a really, you know, really beneficial for the child to come into that circle time. Or if somebody needs social skills or things like that, you really can't teach that in isolation, you know.
Right. So
that for those children that would be appropriate for, that's a really good, you know, that's a good resource that you have that class.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer that one?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All righty. Well, moving on. You can look at this is just kind of the steps to, if you want to look at your LEA's indicator 6 data that Carrie's already shared with you. And these are some benefits of, you know, and this is supported by the research. There's a fact sheet on preschool inclusion, you know, and at OSEP, if you want to look it up, this is just some kind of highlights. And then this is, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but, you know, with inclusion, both children with and without disabilities benefit. They show an increase in their social skills among, you know, both typically developing and children with disabilities. Children with disabilities develop friendships with their same age, typically developing peers, and the outcomes It shows, there's that preschool to prison, pipeline, showing that, successful preschoolers generally have a lower, or lead to have more successful post-school adjustments. So, not everyone, I think, thinks about the importance of preschool and getting started off, with great social skills and in that classroom. But, like I said, the research now is showing that, yeah, it does matter. And all of your typically developing children, of course, have shown only positive outcomes. The services that they get and bringing services to the classroom, that helps all children. Some more benefits of inclusion. The retention of skills is much more likely to have long-lasting effects than the skills that we teach in isolation. The families of children, both with and without disabilities, generally, they have positive views of that inclusion. And inclusion itself is not more expensive than having separate programs for children with disabilities. Those are all, kind of fallacies. So there's my pitch on that one. And I don't know if you guys have this, or do you use it in your practice?
Yes, I provided that at the beginning of the year at our in-service.
Okay.
Well, this have both of these.
Yeah, this is just two sides of one page. And of course, it's on our website if you've misplaced it or if you need it again. When the IEP team is deciding what might be the most appropriate LRE for the child, this is a good tool to have. Actually the other side, that's the flow chart, really walks you through it step by step. And we're going to kind of walk through a few scenarios in a few minutes to kind of look and make, just practice determining LRE codes. Of course, you want to look at, can the supplementary aids and services be provided in that classroom that could, help the child achieve there? Do they need any accommodations that might help? But, again, this is your definition of each one of those LRE codes. So, the children, like you said, that are brought in are in the 19, children who attend early childhood programs where they, are pulled out for all of their services are a 21 or a 23, depending on how long their day is. And then those children who receive the majority of services in that typical program are the 20 or 22. And, when you think about majority, something that you said a few minutes ago, if you are, for example, an SLP and there is a special ed teacher, OT, PT, and speech for some of our students who get all services, you're really looking at the majority of all services. So if for that child, let's just say OT and PT and the special education teacher are working in the classroom and it's more appropriate to pull out for some speech or pull out for some of the special ed services, then you really are looking at the majority. So 51% of services provided in that classroom. So it does, it does leave room for some flexibility. Okay, and here's, of course, the front side of that chart. And if you're having parents who are struggling with this and they're not understanding, then this is always a good visual to have at IEP meetings to help, the team to see what's going on. All right, we're going to kind of go I'm going to read you a case. We're going to kind of try to talk through it together on some children. Okay, our first baby is Isabella. She's a 4-year-old child and she has Down syndrome, and she is eligible in the area of developmental delay. She needs special instructional services, speech language therapy, and OT. During the IEP meeting, the team considers the unique needs of Isabella and answers this question: is the child attending a regular early childhood program? The IEP team's answer for Isabella is yes. So then we go the arrow down. The next thing says, how many hours does she attend the early childhood program? Isabella does spend 10 or more hours a week because she's going to Head Start in the regular early childhood program. Now consider, where does she receive the majority of her special ed and related services? She is actually receiving her services in the classroom. So her LRE code is 20. On the next little paragraph, you see where it says LEA inclusion classes, daycare, community preschool classes, Head Start classes, first class pre-K, and any LEA funded placement in private programs with at least 50% non-disabled children. So all of those things count as a regular early childhood program. All right, are y'all good on that one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we need to go through these, or?
No.
Well, are you benefiting from the sort of, let's talk about a particular child?
Yes.
Yes. So.
Okay. All right, well, let's go to the next baby. All right, our next theoretical child is Michael. Michael's a 3-year-old male, and he is eligible for special education services in the area of speech language impairment. The team is considering Michael's unique needs and answers the question, is he attending a regular early childhood program that includes at least 50% typical peers? The answer for Michael is yes. He goes to a preschool daycare. So next arrow down, how many hours does he attend? Similar to Isabella in the first case, Michael is, go into his program full time, so he's 10 or more hours a week in the regular early childhood program. So next question for him is where does he receive the majority of his special ed and related services? Unlike Isabella in the first case, Michael receives his services in another location because he is pulled out without typical peers. So that's, what we, like I said, we call it pull out. So for him, his LRE is what?
21.
21, right. An example, of course, in which this decision is appropriate is the preschooler with a severe artic errors, that does require an environment with, fewer, distractions and less ambient noise so they can hear that fine sound production. All right, are you guys good with that one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, case 3. We're going to meet Lynn. Lynn is a child that has language delays that interfere with her participation in her preschool classroom. She is an eligible student that has an IEP. Her team is looking at her questions. So does she attend a regular early childhood program that includes the majority of typical peers? If the IEP for her is also answering yes, we're looking at how many hours she attends. Lynn attends her church daycare, which is a regular early childhood program, but it is only 3 mornings, 3 hours a week. So then that's less than 10 hours a week. The team then answers her question, where are her services provided? So her SLP visits her church daycare, but stays in the classroom because she is only getting language services. So she's getting her services with her typical peers. So her LRE, of course, is going to be a 22. All right. Next case. During the IEP team meeting, the team is considering the unique needs of Jacob. And Jacob's a 4-year-old male. He attends a Mother's Day Out program, and he is eligible for special education services. So, of course, our team asks, is he attending a regular early childhood program? Yes, of course he is. Next question is, how many hours does he attend? Like Lynn, in case 3, Jacob attends Mom's Day Out, so that's 6 hours a week. So, of course, he is less than 10 hours a week in his regular early childhood program. Next, of course, you're looking at where does he receive the majority of his special ed services? He receives his special instruction in another room outside the classroom with peers. So the team would need to think about what are the obstacles that are keeping Jacob from receiving his special ed services with his typical peers. Could he receive his services in the early childhood environment if they provide some accommodations? Or what changes might be made to adjust that LRE from a 23 to a 22? And it may not be appropriate for Jacob, but it may be. There may be some things that you can look at, doing in the classroom that would, accommodate his needs so that he could have his services there. All right, excuse me. Next child we're going to meet is Sophia. Sophia is 5. She has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. She has cognitive delays, and she's eligible under the area of developmental delay. So the team is looking at her. Does she attend a regular early childhood program? And for Sophia, the answer is no. So again, we're going to follow the no side of the chart and let's look at her next question. She actually attends a special education program. It has only other students who receive special services. The team needs to look at the type of special ed program she is attending. Hers is functionally self-contained, so her LRE will be 18, the separate class. Now remember that, of course, the goals are for your LEA is to have less than 5% of children with IEPs in a separate class. You guys were okay on that, but we want to look at your LEA's percentage for that. The IEP team needs to consider if any supplementary aids and services would be needed for Sophia to benefit from special instruction in a regular program. To be sure that you determine the appropriate LRE for Sophia, you want to ask, could she participate? Is there a way that she could participate in a regular early childhood program? Because any kind of accommodations or aid services and aids, could it be a parapro maybe that she needs? The team wants to think about all of those things or all those possibilities. Just like you do for, K through 12 children. All righty. Case number 6. We are talking about Noah. And Noah is a 4-year-old male. He has severe behavioral issues. So, is Noah attending a regular early childhood program that includes a majority of typical peers? The answer to that one is no, because Noah is attending a specialized treatment center designed to work on those behaviors. So we follow the arrow to the no sign and talk about what kind of program he's attending. So for a child like Noah, who attends a school designed only for children with disabilities and not a regular early childhood program, his LRA would be 17. It's a whole separate school. Again, for this LRE, you would want to, the team needs to determine that his unique needs cannot be met in any other, setting with the provision of any kind of supplementary aids and services. I don't know, do you guys have any students in this situation?
No, we don't have a separate school or separate facility or anything.
We don't see this very often in preschool, but occasionally we do. And then, of course, our last case, I believe, is and I don't think you probably have any of these either, but we'll talk about it anyway. All right, we have Emma. Emma is blind, so she lives at a school that specializes in meeting the needs of students with blindness. So, of course, is she attending a regular early childhood program? No. So we'll follow the no sign and talk about what kind of program she's in. And, of course, since she does live at her school or medical facility and does not attend any kind of program with typical peers, the answer for her is LRA 16, a residential school. Again, we don't have very many of these in preschool, but you do. All right. Oh, we had one more. I'm sorry. This is case number 8. We're going to talk about Robert. Robert is 5. He has an autoimmune disease, and he's often in the hospital for respiratory infections. He also has some serious cognitive delays, and he is eligible for special education under the area of developmental delay. The IEP team is looking, for him. Does he attend a regular early childhood program? And the answer for him is no. So again, we want to look at what kind of program or where is he. For Robert, he's receiving all of his special education services in the family residence. And of course, this means that all your providers are going to Robert's home to deliver services. So is he receiving his services in the residence? Yes. So for him, the LRA code is 14. 14 is very restrictive because it doesn't foster, typical peer interaction that all the research has shown us, stimulates his growth and learning. You probably want to reserve this LRE code for medically fragile students. LRE 14 is not to be used for convenience of parents or service providers or because of transportation issues. I don't know if you all have any LRE 14s. And, back in the old days, we used to do some more of that, but hopefully we don't do a whole lot of that now.
I don't think so.
For those of you who are more seasoned. Let's see. All right. We're going to talk about Emil. And Emil is 4 years old. He stays at home during the day with his mom, and he is eligible to receive services under speech and language impairment. For Emil, does he attend an early childhood program with the typical peers? He does not, so we are going to talk about where he might be. And these are some of the ones we talked about a few minutes ago. Does he receive his services in the residence of the family? No, he does not. He's going to his nearby school to receive his services, so he's coming to you guys to see you. And he does not attend a regular early childhood program. He goes to the SLP's room in the school building, so he also may be traveling to a private clinician's office or a hospital facility or in some kind of clinic on an outpatient basis. The LRE code for Emil is 19, service provider location. All right, so that's all of our cases. Was that helpful? Was that helping, clear up any questions about LREs?
It is.
It is.
It is. It's 19. So
But what if you have a preschooler that's a drop-in that attends a daycare in the county?
If they get their services.
Their services are with me, so we count that still as
that's a
19.
19. Unless we can get them being brought in to you for services and incorporating some pre-K regular environment resource work.
Now, did you say he attends a program, just comes to see you in sessions?
Well, she's saying he's brought in for services in Jasper City, but attends a daycare in Walker County.
Okay, then he actually would be, depending on his amount of time, he might be a 21 or 23 because he does attend a program. He's just not receiving his special education services there.
So what would I code?
He'd be a 21 or a 23 depending on how much time he attends.
Yeah, like, I don't know exactly, I can't remember, but like a 21 is going to be less than 10 hours. And
It is.
Full time.
Okay, so then it's going to be the LRE code where it's greater than 10 hours.
Mm-hmm. It's a 21 that he would be.
Okay,
So
is at least 21.
So I need to cut that as 21.
Unless, and so 21 is saying he's in a daycare or, preschool environment greater than 10 hours a week, but he doesn't receive special education resource a majority of the time with typical peers. So if you code him a 21, we're still not
Meeting.
in the LRE code that's ideal.
So if I put the kiddo, if we do the majority of my services in pre-K, I would code it 23.
It'd be a 20 or 22.
20 or 22.
Yes, that he's in a preschool environment and his special education services are delivered a majority of the time with typical peers.
Right.
That's goal.
And when you're looking, when you're working through that, trying to determine what would be the most appropriate, just kind of work for tricky ones like that, just kind of work through the questions, does he attend a preschool? Yes. And then you can kind of go to the yes side of the chart, to guide you as far as that goes, if it's not just a cut and dry answer. Is that helpful?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. All right. These are just some ways to improve indicator 6. Just know your, systems indicator 6 percentages. You always determine your LRE based on the needs of the child and not the programs of the LEA. And if your system is not meeting targets, think about, you may want to analyze why this, occurred. Think about, were there LRE coding errors? When they get to kindergarten, do you need to change those, codes? Because even for, 5-year-olds who are not yet 6, they still have the preschool LRE codes in kindergarten right now. And you think about, if the LREs were appropriate or how you might make that, that change. And it's going to be different. It's going to look different for different students. And like we talked about a few minutes ago, for some students, it's not appropriate to have their services with typical peers. Some more ways to improve indicator 6. You guys as a group, develop some kind of plan. Think about if you need to go back and look at students' LREs, do that. I know that Jasper City is, sort of one of our smaller LEAs, but, look at what you have in your system available, plugging those children into some Head Start, community-based preschools, your LEA class. Sometimes some of our LEAs fund placement in private preschools, Title I classes. Do you guys have first class pre-K in your system?
Not in our system, but we did have one in our city, but it recently closed. So we don't have one locally anymore.
How about Head Starts? Do y'all have Head Starts?
Not in our city. The county has some, but we don't have any. So
do you have children that attend Head Start?
The county opens it to some of our city kids, but a lot of our parents don't go because of it's in the county. It could be anywhere, and they have a travel issue.
Right. I just wondered, every system, it looks different in that way. And again, the other
programs, but it's limited slots. So, we try to get as many of our kids in, but,
Right. Oh, I understand totally. Again, you want to look at your kindergartners that are 5, not yet 6. Is their LRE correct? So since they've gone transition to kindergarten now. Some more ways to improve indicator 6. Talk about, ongoing short and long-term planning. Periodically evaluate the child's progress towards the goal and, how the current LRE is working for that child and how the current LRE might be affecting those outcomes. Use a variety of strategies. Talk about staffing configurations. We talked a little bit about that, and community collaboration models. Look at some PD for preschool like we're doing today. And the contact information, if you have any questions about preschool LRE, of course, you would call one of us on the preschool team, Sheila Bowling, myself, or Denise Wilson. And there is our contact information and our phone number. This is the end of the indicator 6 presentation. Give me 1 second.